Welcome to Unit 3, Chapters 6 and 7. We're going to look over groups and organizations and then crime and deviance. So let's begin looking at Chapter 6, Groups and Organizations. Most of us happen to understand that we belong to groups, okay? But there are different types of groups that we belong to, and in these groups, then based on the type, we have different expectations of behaviors and interaction among the people within that group. So unless you're really kind of conscious about this, you may not even realize that your behavior and your thoughts and all of that actually adjusts depending on the type of group that you're in. So let's look at the types of groups, but let's first define groups. Groups is a group of people, at least two or more, who interact on a regular basis and for the most part have some kind of similar identity, that basically there's something that brings them all together into the group. Now, the types of groups, there is really something called an aggregate, or what you would know as a crowd. This is people who are in the same place at the same time, but do not necessarily interact with each other. So a crowd could be people who are at a basketball game or who are at a concert. You're all in the same place at the same time, but you won't necessarily interact with everybody in the crowd. You also have a category. Now, a category is a number of people who share a characteristics. So categories are things like right-handed, brown-eyed, tall, short, male, female. Those are not groups, but those are categories. Now, there are 5 types of groups that we are all members of: primary group, secondary group, in-group, out-group, and a reference group. So let's look at primary and secondary groups. According to Charles Horton Cooley, primary groups play the most critical role in our lives. So the primary group is usually fairly small and is made up of individuals who generally engage in face-to-face interaction and has long-term emotional connections. This group serves our emotional needs. So the best example of a primary group for most of us is your family. It could also be those that you consider your best friend. Now, secondary groups are often larger and impersonal. They may also be task focused or time limited. These groups are more goal or task oriented rather than more emotional. So a classroom or an office could be an example of a secondary group. So this class would be an example of a secondary group. We're large, we're more formal. We don't know every member in the family, in the group, unless they tell you or share something with you. We're time limited and we're task focused. Now, in and out groups are the types of groups in which you are a member of or not a member of. So an in-group is a group that an individual feels that he or she belongs to and believes to be an integral part of who they are. An out group, on the other hand, is a group someone does not belong to, and often we may feel disdain or competition in relationship to the out group. So your in group is simply a group that you are a member of, and an out group is a group that you are not a member of. Now, the out group can be a group that you eventually want to be an in group. So it could be a group that you want to become a member of, but you haven't achieved that yet, or you haven't done what it takes to be a member of that group. Or the out group could be a group in which you absolutely do not want to be a member of. Either or, within and out groups, it's just whether you are an established member or not. Now, the last type of group is a reference group. Now, a reference group is a group that people compare themselves to. So this reference group provides a standard of measurement. So people will use the reference group to compare themselves to what they see the reference groups does or does not do, and then they compare themselves based upon that. So all of us have reference groups. We have groups in which we uphold with high value or respect. And so we look at what that group does and how it thinks and believes in, and we measure ourselves up. Are we doing the same things that they are doing? But a reference group can also be a group, just like an outgroup, that you don't want to be a member of or you do not hold respect for. So if that is the type of reference group you're looking at, you want to make certain you are not behaving in the same manner that they are, or you're not holding the same thinking and beliefs that they are. Now, just to look very briefly over group size, there are two types of group sizes. Very simple. Dyad is a 2-member group and a triad is a 3-member group. Now, one thing you might want to keep in mind is a triad is more stable than a dyad, because a triad, if the third member leaves, you still have a group. It just becomes a dyad. But in a dyad, if one of the members leaves, then it's no longer a group. So those are the types of groups in which we all may belong to. Now let's look at leadership. There are 2 types of leaderships, and then there are 3 different styles of leaderships. So let's look at these. The 2 types are instrumental leader and an expressive leader. Now, an instrumental leader is a person who is goal-oriented and goal-focused. That's it. It is, we have this job to do and we need to get this job accomplished. An expressive leader then is concerned with the emotional and health and well-being of the group members. So an expressive leader is the type of leader that is more personal and has that more engaging, worrying about how the group members are. They're still task focused or goal oriented, but they're taking into consideration also the emotional well-being of the members. Now, each of us are probably one of 2 of these types of leadership, or you will work better underneath one of these leaderships. I myself am more of an instrumental leader. Now, don't think that an instrumental leader does not care about the well-being of its group. They do, but that is not the primary focus of the leader. Now, there are 3 styles of leadership. There is democratic leader, which involves all members of a group in the decision-making process. There's a laissez-faire leader, that is French, and that is a hands-off leader who does not micromanage. So it basically lets the group do as it pleases as long as it accomplishes the goal. And then authoritarian leader is it micromanages by issuing orders and assigning tasks. Now, a democratic leader will allow the group as a whole to decide. So it votes and it decides what it's going to do and how it's going to do it. So it leaves all the decision making up to the group. The laissez-faire leader just basically assigns it to whether an individual or a group takes that step back, make certain the group's doing what it's supposed to do, checking in with it every once in a while, but for the most part, leaving it hands off, letting the group do what it needs to do. And then authoritarian is the micromanager. They're the ones who are going to be watching over your shoulder. Now, just as the types, you will find yourself probably more pulled to one of the types of styles of leader that you would be, or the type of leader in which you work best under. I do not work well under an authoritarian leader. I do not like micromanaging or being micromanaged. So that would not be my type. I am more of a laissez-faire leader than I am even a democratic. So between the types and the styles, look at them, determine which type you would be and which style you would be as a leader, and then also look at the type and styles that you work best under. Most likely they're going to be about the same. So next we're going to look at types of organizations. Now, with an organization, let's just remember that a formal organization is large and impersonal, that are usually in the form of a bureaucracy. So an organization is a large bureaucratic entity. There are three types of formal organizations. You have a normative organization, which is a voluntary organization. So this is an organization in which you choose or you volunteer to be a member of. You have a coercive organization. And a coercive organization is the type of organization in which you are forced to be a member of. You have no choice but to be a member of it. And then you have the utilitarian organization, which is in organizations that are joined to fulfill a specific material need. It is a service type or a goal-oriented type organization. Now, earlier, I stated that organizations are a bureaucracy. And so this is true. And there are five different categories or characteristics of a bureaucracy. We're going to look at that. This is a clear division of labor. In other words, everybody has a specific task or a job to perform. There's a hierarchy of authority. So in it, there's a ranking from, top person on down, and each person has a level of authority. There are clear rules or explicit rules that refer to how things are to be done, and these are outlined or written down somewhere. A bureaucracy is very impersonal or characterized by impersonality, which it takes personal feelings out of it and basically is all on the professional level. So you've heard that, leave the personal at home when you're at work. And then the last characteristic is meritocracy, which means we are hired based upon qualifications. So these are the characteristics of a bureaucracy. Every organization has these in it. So you can look at any organization entity. You can look at schools, churches, even down to families. All of these are considered bureaucratic. So any group of people that you can see these certain characteristics in is considered a bureaucracy. Now we're going to move into chapter 7, which is deviance, crime, and social control. Let's look at deviance. When we talk about deviance, what exactly is deviance? And what is the relationship between deviance and crime? Okay, according to sociologist William Graham Sumner, deviance is a violation of established contextual, cultural, or social norms, whether those be, remember, folkways, mores, or a law. A deviance can be as minor as sneezing without covering your nose and your mouth, or as major as committing a murder. Whether an act is labeled deviant or not depends on many factors, including where the deviant behavior happened, who is in the audience, and the individual connecting it or committing it. Now, I want you to write this down. All illegal behavior is deviant, but not all deviant behavior is illegal. So let me say that one more time. All illegal behavior is deviant, but not all deviant behavior is illegal. So, deviant behavior is any violation of a social norm. If society says you are not to do this, or this behavior is not acceptable, and you do it, you are being deviant. So, what are some things that society does in order to prevent deviant behavior? Well, we use what are called social control measures. So these are regulations or techniques in which we use to prevent deviant behavior. Okay, now social control measures can be given in any group. So think about a family. Think about some of the rules you have while living in the house with your parents. All those rules are going to be social control measures in which to teach you what behavior is right or wrong, good or bad. And then the bad ones or the unacceptable behaviors are going to have consequences for it. So for example, if you have a curfew, and if you're late for the curfew, then you get grounded. So the grounding is the social control element that is used to prevent the deviant behavior of being late past curfew. Now, these elements that we use in social control are called sanctions. Now, sanctions are penalties or rewards for either following norms or breaking norms. So sanctions can be positive as well as negative. Now, positive sanctions are rewards for doing what you're supposed to do. So a promotion at work is a positive sanction for working hard, or getting an A on a test is a positive sanction for studying. A negative sanction then is a punishment for violating norms. So being arrested is a punishment for, let's say, shoplifting or breaking any law. Or getting an F on a test is a negative sanction because you didn't study. Both types of sanctions play a role in social control. Okay, so sociologists actually classify the sanctions into formal and informal sanctions. Now, a formal sanction are sanctions that are officially recognized and enforce norm violations. Formal sanctions will most likely be written down somewhere. And so, for example, a student at a college violates the code of conduct, and so they might be expelled. That code of conduct is written down in the student handbook, okay? Informal sanctions then actually are more kind of face-to-face, non-written down kind of sanctions. So, for example, wearing flip-flops to an opera, or, swearing and saying a cuss word at church might draw some disapproving looks or frowns, and those would be the negative informal sanctions. Okay, so what I want you to do with social control is think about all the different things that you have that have rules or regulations placed upon you. Look at those, which are the social control measures, and then determine the sanctions, positive or negative, and if it's formal or informal. So when we look at deviance, let's look at the theories behind deviance, or why some sociologists think that deviant behavior occurs. So we're going to look at these, and if there is a sociologist that is attached to a certain theory or idea, make certain that you can name them and say which theory they're with. Okay, so let's look at Robert Merton's strain theory. Now, the strain theory means that when trying to accomplish a goal, there are two ways to accomplish it. One, you can follow the way society says is acceptable to achieve that goal. Or two, you will be deviant and do it in a way that society says you shouldn't. So for example, the strain theory would say to accomplish a goal of getting a lot of money, okay? You can do this by one of two ways. You can follow the way society says is acceptable. So society says it's acceptable to come into a large amount of money by working hard, getting promotions at work, getting raises at work, inheriting money, winning the lottery. Those are all acceptable ways, according to society, of getting a lot of money. Or, according to Merton, you can deviate from those ways and get money by illegal means. So you could rob a bank, you could sell drugs, you could sell knockoff products. All of these are illegal, so therefore they're deviant, but still accomplishing the same goal of getting a lot of money. Next, let's look at the social disorganization theory. It states that when societies break down and the people are not united as a cohesive group, those people are more prone to be deviant towards each other. So social disorganization theory states that when a group of people, such as a community or a town, falls apart basically and no longer sees themselves as one group. Okay, so instead of seeing it as a we and an us, we now see ourselves just as I or me, and it's me against you. Okay, when this disintegration happens within a group, we are more prone to be deviant towards the other members. If we are a cohesive group and we see ourselves as one, we tend to support each other and be kind to each other. But social disorganization theory states that when we no longer see ourselves as one group, we are more apt to be deviant towards each other. Now, the labeling theory says that placing labels of deviant upon a person, therefore, the person begins to see themselves as being deviant. Okay, so understand that when we label a person as being deviant, they then begin to see themselves as being deviant. Now, there are two types of deviance that falls under the labeling theory: primary deviance and secondary deviance. Now, primary deviance is deviant behavior that does not have any long-term impact on the person's image or interaction with others. So this is a person who did something deviant. Everybody kind of looked at it as wrong, but it was no big deal. So the person really was not labeled as deviant, so therefore the person's image wasn't tarnished and people still interacted with this person. But you have secondary deviance, which is deviant behavior that does impact the person's image or interaction with others. So this is a deviant behavior in which the individual is labeled as something very deviant. They are now seen as being deviant by everybody and therefore influences the interaction. People are most likely not going to interact with that person because they see themselves as being deviant. Now, Edward Sutherland has a theory of differential association. And what Sutherland stated was that people learn deviant behavior from those that they hang around with. So the more they are exposed to a deviant behavior, the more chance they will do the deviant act. And the reason Sutherland says this is because the more you are exposed to a deviant behavior, the more you see that as the normal behavior. And then you no longer see it as deviant because it is normal for that group. So Sutherland says that we learn deviant behavior, and the longer we are exposed to it, the more chances we are to commit it. Now, Travis Hirschi has the control theory, and he stated that a person's chance of being deviant is related to the degree in which a person feels connected to a group or society. So if you feel more connected to a group, you are less likely to be deviant. If you feel less connected to the group, you have more chances. Now, this is the group as a whole. So think about a community, or even think about groups or cliques in schools. Okay, if you feel like you are an active member of that group, an accepted member, almost like an in-group, then you have less chance of being deviant because you're a member of that group, unless that group is doing deviant behavior. Then you'll do deviant behavior. But we're looking at the connection to the group itself here. And then if you have a group or a person who is less connected to a group, they have more chances of being deviant. So look at all these theories of deviance. Know the sociologist that is attached to them, and how it explains deviant behavior arises. Now, lastly, we're going to look at the types of crimes. Now, when we look at crime, there are actually two categories of crime, okay? When we're looking at crime, actually the FBI keeps an index of crimes, and they keep an index of these types of crimes that I'm going to talk about. And so at any given time, you can go on to the FBI's webpage and you can click by state or by county or by town, and you can look at the rates or percentages of these crimes that are committed in that area. But let's first look at crimes. Now, crime, of course, is a behavior that violates official laws and is punishable through formal sanctions. So when we look at crimes, there are two categories of crime. There's violent crimes, which are those crimes that are against other people, and there are nonviolent crimes, which is destruction or theft of property. So violent crimes involves other people, nonviolent crimes involves property. Now there are 6 types of crimes. Victimless crimes, those are crimes in which all members involved knowingly and willingly participate in it. So there is no victim if the person knowingly and willingly participates. So purchasing drugs from a drug dealer is considered a victimless crime because the drug dealer and the person buying the drugs both know that it's illegal and are still willing to do it. Now, there is an argument that there is no such thing as a victimless crime, but this argument is actually looking out at the people not committing or involved in the crime, but the people in the outer circle who would be impacted by the crime. Okay, so let's just say, for example, a spouse pays for a prostitute. Okay, that's victimless because the person knows that paying for a prostitute is illegal. The prostitute knows selling sex for money is illegal. Those two individuals would be considered victimless. But then let's say the husband or wife of the person finds out and then divorces that person. So then the victims of the crime would be the spouse and any children that would be involved, because then they are impacted by that one person's choice. So, but when we are looking at crimes, we are looking at the people involved in the crime itself. So there is a crime that is known as victimless. Now, professional crime is a person who pursues crime as a day-to-day occupation. So this could be members of gangs. This could be members of the mafia. This could be any person who steals or is a thief and does it on a regular basis. Okay, so a professional criminal is a person who pursues crime from a day-to-day basis. It is one of the reasons why when you get arrested, one of the first things that they're going to do is run your record. And then what they will do then is determine your level of committing crime. Are you a first-time offender? Have you only been arrested a couple of times? Or are you habitual in this behavior, and therefore then they can categorize you as professional. The third type of crime is organized crime. This is a group that regulates relations using criminal and illegal activities. So again, gangs, the mob, human trafficking groups, any group that regulates itself based upon criminal activity is called an organized crime. White collar crime are those committed in the act of a business activity. So that could be money laundering, tax evasion, ID theft, any of those things. A hate crime is a crime motivated by something based on race, religion, ethnic group, national origin, or sexual orientation. And then last is a transnational crime. This is a crime that occurs across multiple national borders. So for example, let's say you launder money here in the United States and then you transfer it to a bank in the Cayman Islands, and then you move that money to a bank account in Switzerland. You have actually just committed a crime in 3 different countries. And so what will happen is, if based upon the crime, you can be charged with the crime in all 3 countries that the crime happened in. So a transnational crime is any crime that occurs over multiple national borders. So again, know the 2 categories of crimes and the 6 different types of crimes. So that's our lecture for Unit 3. Short and simple. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get with me.